So on the one for Dr. I didn't realize there was three of them. So I read the one on Dr. Eady's, but on Dr. Mullins.
Yeah. And I've had a conversation with Dr. Mullins, and I let him know that this is not something that typically the board does approve, because I know you've looked at these things in the past. This particular workshop that Dr. Mullins was wanting to attend is not done very often, and rarely, I think, in the US. I think typically this is a workshop that's done out of the country, and he's been trying like for a long time to attend this meeting. But he's kind of in the same boat. He has already completed his hours. And so he is hoping that he could take this course and then use it for, this would be March 31st, 2024. So he's asking in advance, well in advance. You know, I told him I'd let y'all review it.
Okay. Does anybody else?
I think that when we start doing this, we're setting a bad precedent.
Yeah. You know, I actually got a phone call yesterday from someone else, not in this group, with a similar request for a meeting that was going to be in January. I am getting these types of requests more and more.
Okay.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in. When I did my acupuncture training, I had 1 year, I had 160 hours, and I was not allowed to carry them over to the next year. So.
Yeah, and some states do allow for rollover hours. I think that's probably in their statutes that's allowed, and we just don't have that. And I really think, I'm going to check real quick. Dr. Keck is in attendance on the board meeting, and I know he told me he was going to be in attendance, and I don't know if he might like to speak. I'll allow him to do that, or he may not. But Dr. Keck, if you wanted to, you know, kind of make a comment on your submission that you made, you're able to do that at this time.
It looks like he's mute. Is he muted or is
Yeah, let me see if I can unmute him. Let me try this again. Dr. Keck, can you
hear me?
There you go. There you go. Yes, sir.
Okay, the sound is not very good. I had trouble connecting. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm a little bit out of the mainstream because I practice poultry, and I'm also board certified in poultry. And the board, actually, their time frame for continuing education is different from the time frame that the state of Arkansas has. And, you know, this isn't about not paying a due or going to a meeting. In fact, I almost always go to the Arkansas VMA. I went to Philadelphia. I went to the American VMA meeting this summer. So I have that CE. But this meeting is only 2 weeks outside the time frame, which begins, I think, April 1st. It's a meeting in California. It's a specialty meeting on poultry, and there's a workshop on some emerging diseases that are kind of at the forefront. So by doing that, I'm actually asking the board to allow me to probably receive continuing education that would be certainly more to my specialty. And I would say the format, the agenda, and the speakers are top notch and quite actually probably over and above what normal CE most veterinarians get in a year. So I guess that's my explanation for doing that. I can go to that meeting And also I'll probably go to the AVMA or one of the national meetings next year too. So, but it would be convenient for me to do that.
Okay.
And Lloyd, I think we're sympathetic to your accumulation of your CE, but if we set this precedent, it opens the door for everybody, and it'll just really overwork Kara trying to keep up with it and whatnot. And I've attended several meetings, and it would have been nice to carry it over to the next year, but that's not the way our regulations are set up. And so, even though I often have my CE requirements in before our annual meeting here in Arkansas, I still try to attend that, even knowing that that's not going to help me for the following year.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents on this. I'm licensed in 3 states, and one of them is Missouri, and they allow us to carry over. But I never carry over. I mean, even though I could, I usually never carry over because the other states always require you to have CE for that year. That being said, and I understand the presidents that you said, but I think if you take it on an individual basis, some of these, like in these specialties with the poultry, I would, maybe be a little more sympathetic. And then the one that Dr. Mullins has, is that the one about the hip replacement deal?
Yes.
Now that has not been, the dates on that are January 29th and 30th of 23. Is that correct? So he's not completed that yet, correct?
That is correct, but he has already completed his requirements for the renewal due March 31st, 23.
Okay.
So he was wanting to use this for 2024.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he's thinking way ahead then. Dr. Bonner, do you have any opinion on it?
No, I feel like we probably need to leave the time constraints set the way they are, because it's gonna be a big can of worms if we start doing it for some and not for others, or then we're playing favorites on, it will seem that we're playing favorites, even if it's one CE is better than the other or what have you. So I would lean toward us just leaving the time constraints set the way they are on all 3 cases.
Okay. All right. Well,
That was a motion. I'll second it.
okay. Is that a motion, Dr. Bonner?
Oh, yes, sir. I make a motion to refuse all 3 requests.
Okay, it's been seconded by Dr. Byrd. Any further discussion? If there's not, we'll vote. All in favor of the motion to deny the 3 CE requests, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So the motion passes. So those 3 will be denied based on our existing deadlines. Okay. So I guess we'll move on from that point to the review of the temporary permits. Is that correct? That's what.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so temporary permits issued since the last board meeting. Dr. Shelby Nestor, Dr. Genevieve Rimmer, Dr. Douglas Neal, Dr. Caitlin Hornig, Dr. Michael Stanford, Dr. Randy Cran, Dr. Elizabeth Leverins, and Dr. JC Sweeney.
Okay. And those are all, the temporary permits don't have to be approved, right?
They do not. No, those are it's just kind of an update for you all to know.
Okay.
Same thing with the veterinary technicians, if y'all are ready for that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do those two. Yeah.
I do have a larger list this time than last time, which was expected due to the way the testing falls. So I have Skylar Arms, graduate of ASUBB, Owen Bailey, graduate of ASUBB, Keisha Beard, graduate of Crowder College, Hannah Boyce, graduate of ASUBB, Canada, graduate of Dallas College, Jade Minguez, graduate of ASUBB, Tiffany Hammond, graduate of Trident Technical College, Megan Aguilar, graduate of ASUBB, Hannah Long, graduate of Penn Foster, Ashley Compton, graduate of Heritage College, Allison Meyer, graduate of Crowder College, Tabitha James, graduate of Murray State University, that is a bachelor's degree program. And finally, Brittany Cole, graduate of Volunteer State Community College. So some of those are new graduates, and then some of those are actually transfers in from other states. So some of the colleges you might not as be familiar with, those were folks who were actually relocating to Arkansas. Those schools are in other states. So
Okay. All right.
that's it.
Okay, then we'll move on then to item 4 on the agenda, which is the complaints. We'll start out with updates on existing case files.
Okay. So I have a couple of updates for existing cases. Dr. Joshua Harvey, docket number 2020-04. The board approved that consent agreement at the last meeting on August 16th. I have received payment of the civil penalty. I received that on September 20th, and then he is still needing his 6 hours of continuing education and record keeping. His office contacted me last week, and so I do know that they are looking at courses for that. So I know he does plan to take those courses. And
Okay.
then Dr. Angela Rose, that was docket number 2021-03. You also approved that consent agreement at the August board meeting. I have received payment of the civil penalty. I received that on August 26th, and also the continuing education hours in feline dentistry that she needed. And so all terms of that consent agreement have been met, and that case is considered closed at this time.
Okay. All right, so those are all the existing case files. I guess we've got a special deal here that's a letter from Mrs. Helen Baldwin.
Yes, yeah, and I will go into some more detail on that. I know hopefully you all had a chance to read the letter that she submitted. That did not come in as a typical complaint. That letter was actually addressed to the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, which is Mr. Wes Ward. And so he passed that on to me to handle that. And so, it wasn't really a situation in which I felt that it really needed to go to like an expert reviewer or anything like that. I think it was truly the type of letter that we could compare to the Practice Act and the board rules and try to make a determination on whether this should be elevated to some type of violation. I did speak with Ms. Baldwin on the phone. So I did have a conversation with her about the situation. I also made some other phone calls, one of those being to the this particular emergency clinic in question is owned by a corporation. I was able to speak with the head veterinarian in charge for the corporation. Discussed the letter with him, also sent him a copy of the letter. I've not received a formal response, but we did have a phone conversation. They are, like everyone else, experiencing staffing issues. They just cannot be open all the time. Because they just don't have doctors available to work shifts like they normally would. It is my understanding, and I have been able to confirm this, that they do send at the beginning of each week, I think on Monday, their hours to their veterinarians that regularly refer to that clinic. They get an email each Monday with what their hours are going to be for that week and whether they're going to be open. And so they do communicate with the referring veterinarians on hours. I have looked at their social media. I have looked at their website. Social media hours, business hours are very up to date. I've actually checked it on several occasions. Those tend to be updated quite often. And they've kind of been a little different each time I've looked. So I think they're keeping that up to date. The website, I will say, is not up to date. They do still advertise 24/7 emergency services, which at this point in time is not is not true technically. So anyway, so after I looked into all of those things, and Michael and I have had some discussions about this and really compared it with the Practice Act and the board rules. And, bottom line, I don't think an extremely unfortunate situation, a completely unfortunate situation. And I'm sure others have probably experienced the same thing and not being able to locate an emergency service when they need it for their pet. I don't really think it was like the intention of the referring veterinarian or the emergency clinic to not be open. I don't think they were willingly trying to mislead anybody. And so, my recommendation would probably be to send a letter to the clinic. I do think the website needs to be up to date. If they don't have 24/7 emergency services right now, I think that needs to come down until they can get that back up and running. But also I've thought about possibly sending an email to all veterinarians, just reminding them that if they're going to be making a referral to an emergency service for their clients, to please call ahead, make sure that service is available, make sure that clinic, wherever they typically refer to, make sure they are open. And I think that would just maybe be like a good reminder for veterinarians to just be doing that. Because I know, especially in the larger communities where there are emergency clinics, I think everyone's really used to just referring after hours calls to the emergency clinics. And I think due to current situations and staffing issues and shortages and things like that, I think they can't always be open all the time. And so I think just double checking before making the referral would be just kind of a good reminder for people. So anyway, with that, I will open this up for discussion and would like to hear your thoughts on that.
And Karen, can I add something to your explanation real quick?
Oh, sure.
So talking about the tone of the letter, Karen kind of I just want to put an extra highlight on it, is that this is not going to be putting veterinarians, if we send out a letter, it would not be putting veterinarians on notice of this is a problem and you shall achieve compliance and things like that. This is going to be more of just a communication to all veterinarians that, hey, this is something that we're starting to see more of. As you all know, the current situation in the veterinary community and with emergency services are the way they are. And we just want to encourage you to do these things in service to your clients. And, we trust that with this additional information, you'll make the best decision for your clients and for your patients. So it's going to be going out. Well, our idea was for it to go out in that vein and not as something that's putting everyone on notice and wagging our finger at them.
So what you're saying in this letter was the veterinarian on his answer machine referred to was that an after hours clinic he referred to, or just a?
Yeah, I can go into a little bit more detail about that. And this is in my conversation with Miss Baldwin, but she had an emergency towards the end of the day on Friday heading into the Labor Day weekend. My understanding is that she called her regular veterinarian and it was a situation where, hey, doctor's with the patient right now. It's getting towards the end of the day on Friday. So we're going to go ahead and just refer you to the emergency clinic. And so that's where Miss Baldwin went. I do believe she tried to call ahead. I don't think she could get anyone on the phone. So she drove over, and they had it posted on their door that they were closed. And so by that point, her regular clinic is closed. And so it was not a good situation. I mean, it really wasn't. I mean, I do understand the concern for sure. Because what do you do at that point?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because this whole after hours emergency deal, I deal with it, and being large animals, my closest referral clinic is Tulsa. So when I get in and I've already had a discussion with that clinic, there's 5 or 6 veterinarians there. And when I first established a relationship with them, I called and said, hey, look, obviously when I'm out of town and am unavailable, or if I get an emergency that's going to need, 24/7 care, do you mind if I refer to you? And they didn't have they were open to that. And so I usually don't, occasionally I'll call ahead because usually I want to give whoever the veterinarian on duty a heads up as to what's coming their way. And obviously just to be sure that they've got room in the clinic to take them in. But I know there's some areas that really don't have emergency type services. Like I was surprised, I'm from Texarkana, and I was home about 6 months ago and got to talk to somebody about small animal veterinary services. And in Texarkana, there's no after hours emergency clinic. And like most other cities, most people aren't doing after hours emergency care. So they told me that if you have a small animal emergency in Texarkana, you have to go to Shreveport. That's the closest full service emergency clinic. So yes, it's becoming a problem because, there's a lot of practices, or don't offer emergency services. Or now I do know some will do it on, for special clients, but otherwise they don't advertise emergency services. And I understand because I'm a one-man practice and I can only work so much. And when you start getting all this out, and everybody used to dump on me because I was the guy that would take them in and had the clinical setup to take care of these. But anymore, I can't even do it anymore. So, I do what I can, but a lot of times they get referred to Tulsa. And I know some people don't want to go to Tulsa, but what other option do you have? I mean, and I understand where they're coming from. And obviously, if this is an advertised emergency clinic, yeah, I think they need to do a better job of, informing people when they will or won't be open. Because, like I know in Northwest Arkansas, I don't know that anybody necessarily. I know because I don't use it, but I know that I've been with my pets. I've been referred there before, and we usually call. They usually give us a number for the emergency clinic, and we usually call the emergency clinic directly. So we're not communicating with our regular veterinarian. We're communicating with and sometimes it's a 2 or 3 hour wait unless it's a dire emergency to get something in there. So yeah, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, but I don't know what you do about it other than you educate the clients that this is what's available and these are our protocols, and you may have to refer them 2 hours away to a clinic if that's the case. So I don't know what everybody else's experience is, but I know in Little Rock they've got emergency clinics there. Dr. Bonner, what's your situation where you're at for emergency services?
Spot here. We do take after hours calls, so we're one of the few clinics in the area that does. Closest clinic, emergency clinic is going to be open is going to be Shreveport, Little Rock, or Fort Smith, and all are going to be right around that 2 hour drive mark.
Yeah. So how many veterinarians are in your practice?
3 full time.
Okay, so you can split it up a little bit, which makes it so yes. That's the biggest deal. I see a lot of smaller practices that are 1 or 2 man practices. It's just hard to supply emergency duty on a regular basis because when I used to do it a lot, it just seemed like it was night after night after night. And after 2 or 3 nights of that, you can't do it anymore. So, yeah, it's an issue, but I mean, I think that's where, like Northwest Arkansas, when they put their emergency clinic in, it was kind of a co-op of a lot of the veterinarians in the area that went together and actually invested in that clinic. So and as far as I know, we've actually had to use them on a Labor Day weekend from one of my daughter's dogs, and it was a 3-hour wait. Obviously, it wasn't anything dire, but it was a 3-hour wait when we got up there. And the reason being is they're servicing essentially Northeast Oklahoma, Northwest Arkansas, and Southwest Missouri, because that's the closest emergency clinic. So, yeah, on a holiday when nobody else is open, yeah, it can be tough. I don't know what the answer is, but
I agree that for sure having them change their website, update their website, because it shouldn't advertise 24-hour service if they're not going to be open 24-hour.
yeah. And a lot of the emergency clinics, they're just open, like at Northwest Arkansas, they're open from like 7 until 7 or something like that. It's just, they don't see patients during normal business hours. They only see after hours patients. And so they're staffed really overnight. They're not staffed during the day. And so if you're truly an emergency clinic, that's probably the way it's going to be run. And so there would be somebody there after hours. But unlike Dr. Bonner, if you're not going to be there 24/7, don't advertise 24/7. Any other comments or discussion on this topic?
So what I'm hearing from the board is that Kara needs to go ahead and respond back to the emergency clinic and tell them that the board has requested that they change the language on their website to clarify what their actual hours are, and if they can't stay up 24/7, they need to remove that language.
Yeah, I definitely think that's what they'll do. And they may even want to put something on there to, maybe call ahead, something to contact the clinic, before you're referred or before you show up.
So I think what we'll do then is we'll draft a letter and so that we have it in writing, and then we'll also communicate with our contacts at the practice and explain to them, kind of give them this official communication, and then we'll see what their response is. And if the response is something other than, we'll make the change and we'll work with you on that. We will get back with the board and let you know what the response was to the communication.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll just make one comment. Having had a recent experience, even in human medicine, you go to the hospital and they're full on occasion, and you could sit in a waiting room for hours before you're seen. And I personally have waited 11 hours to be seen, and waited 18 to be admitted to a room. So this is not what we have here is people's expectations, and we can't be everybody's God. But I agree, if they're advertising 24/7, they should adjust their advertisements appropriately so that people aren't driving several hours in some cases to get emergency services, to find out that they're not even open at all. that would be pretty frustrating.
Yeah. Okay, so y'all are gonna draft a letter and send that out, and then you'll, at the next meeting, you'll just report what kind of response you got to the letter, so. Okay, well then let's move on. Our next item is complaint report.
Okay. So this is new format for the complaint report. We have been utilizing outside veterinarians that we've contracted with to review complaints for us. Hopefully, as y'all read through this report, hopefully you all liked the new format and found it hopefully helpful and efficient. So the first set of complaints that we have, dockets 2021-11, 12, 13, and 14. Those were all one case, but filed as 4 separate complaints. The first 2 complaints, docket 2021-11 and 2021-12, were against the veterinarians. And so we can do a quick overview on those. Both of the allegations on each of those complaints was incompetence, gross negligence, or other malpractice in the practice of veterinary medicine. On 2021-11, the recommendation would be to dismiss the complaint. This veterinarian was not actually the one that performed the procedure that happened, although they were the clinic owner, but their colleague was the one that actually performed the procedure that took place. And so for 2021-12, you'll see that the recommendation would be to the reviewer concluded that the respondent did use an instrument in the procedure that was inappropriate. And so after we did our own separate review on the staff level and had some additional consultation with the expert, we did agree with the expert's assessment of the complaint. And so our recommendation for that would be to move forward with finding a violation of failure to render care is generally accepted by the veterinary profession. And you can see there we've made some recommendations on civil penalty and a number of hours of extra continuing education. So, but I'll let y'all ask any questions you might have. Hopefully you were able to read the report from the reviewer. And so I know that you all may have some additional questions on that.
So 13 and 14, those were on the assistants?
Yes, and so the recommendation on those, they were not certified veterinary technicians. They were just employees of the clinic. So I think as typically we normally do, those need to be dismissed. They're really not. They're outside the board's jurisdiction.
All right. Okay.
I just have one comment. It sort of makes sense to me what you've done, but it doesn't give us a lot of information. And I guess I wonder, as a board, without additional information, are we in danger of putting ourselves in a compromising situation to accept this as redacted as it is.
Well,
Maybe that's a legal question.
okay. Yeah. Michael, I'll let you.
So your question is about the redactions, but also just the information in general about the complaint.
Correct.
Okay. The first thing we'll take that back. We'll take those in reverse. So on the general information about the complaint, you can find the expert's analysis on Exhibit 1, which gives us the same kind of summary of the complaint that you are accustomed to seeing. In terms of the redaction, so from a strictly like public records standpoint, if someone came and said, I want to see all these records, they could see just the records unredacted. The purpose of redacting that information is in the event of is because the veterinary community is kind of a tight-knit community and everyone kind of knows each other. This will allow the board to dispense with complaints or move forward with complaints without knowing the identity of their colleagues, so that doesn't become a legal issue later on in a hearing, or becomes an issue if someone dismisses it. So it allows, and during the complaint process, for the board to focus on the merits of the case and not cast any doubt on the process. Whenever you get to the actual hearing, you'll know the identity of those veterinarians, and that'll give you the ability to recuse if you need to, or whatever the case may be. Does that answer your questions? And if not, I'm happy to talk to you about it as much as you need to.
Well, I see we would probably, even if we had all the records in front of us, accept the recommendations of the experts we've sought out. But appears to me, it's a pretty good departure from the way we've done things in the past. And I just wanted to make sure, since our job is to protect the public and serve the public, as opposed to actually serve the veterinarians, that we aren't in some way abdicating our authority by essentially delegating the response to the experts. It's like we've transferred our obligation to these experts because we're not seeing enough to really judge whether the expert is, in our view, correct or not.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you are right. We have certain obligations, or the board has certain obligations to the public. One of those legal obligations is to be a finder of fact in any disciplinary hearings. So during that process, you are correct. You will be required to see all of, to review all of the evidence against a veterinarian who is brought up on potential violations and things of that nature. So that still remains firmly in place with this board. The time when that happens, though, is that at an actual disciplinary hearing, if that is happening, or at a disciplinary hearing, and you will have access to all the information to make that happen. What we're determining here is not if a violation occurred, but if there is sufficient evidence to take some sort of disciplinary, or to initiate some sort of a disciplinary action. So, for example, if we were to say on this case, yes, we need to issue a consent agreement, And if they don't accept the consent agreement or something can't be worked out that can be approved by the board, then we're going to go to a disciplinary hearing. At that point, you would have the ability to not only hear testimony from the expert witness and all the witnesses and the veterinarian, but just like in previous disciplinary hearings, you'll be able to ask them questions. And so not only will we be able to have access to all that, you'll be able to delve into those questions as much as you like. So I would look at this process as being more of a lack of a better term, a probable cause hearing to see if, okay, this isn't, we have enough in front of us to initiate proceedings and hear all of the evidence.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we got to take into consideration is, I know Dr. Bird, you're saying how we used to do it. Well, the reason we don't do it that way anymore is because I think it was the governor several years ago pressed upon us to follow the Administrative Procedures Act. And that's where, as a board, we have to follow a certain protocol so that if a ruling is made by the board and it gets appealed to a circuit court or district court or whatever, that our ruling is going to be upheld. So we've got to follow the Administrative Procedure Acts so that our rulings stand or upheld. And so, like part of the problem with our board is we have such a small board that if we recuse a board member, it's very hard for us to, or even two members, if one's recused and one's part of the complaint committee and they have to be recused, it kind of hampers the board on being able to rule a certain way. And so a lot of other state boards have full-time investigators that investigate these claims, and they do exactly what's done here is they make a report to the board. Now, we can, as a board, we can vote to accept the recommendations of the investigator, which in most of these cases is a veterinarian, but also our legal counsel and executive secretary have looked in on this too. And so it's not just the decision from the reviewer, but if we elect to not take these recommendations, then yes, then we move on to, you can say, well, we're not going to take these recommendations. And the next step is going to be a formal hearing. So we just have to decide, are these cases or the violations that supposedly occur or the complaints in these cases, are the violations such that they warrant a public hearing, or is it some minor infractions that we can get by with a consent agreement? So that's kind of where we're at now. Now, if you elect not to do the consent agreement, then our only other option is at that point to go to administrative hearing. Am I correct, Michael?
Yeah, it's either it's either administrative hearing or it's dismiss the case.
Yeah. So we don't want to get to the point to where every allegation that is presented to us that has any merit is going to end up as a hearing, a formal hearing, because that's really going to bog the board down if that's the way we have to handle every case. So I think we have to look at, we're trying to find good reviewers. Kara's done a good job of trying to find good reviewers, and I think this is the way a lot of other boards do it, so it doesn't hamper their board's decision when it comes down to making decisions on these recommendations. So obviously, if it's a very severe a very severe violation of the Practice Act, then it's probably going to a formal hearing. The last formal hearing we had, we thought was severe enough that it needed to be a formal hearing. So that's kind of where we're coming from. But the method has changed because of the fact that we were informed that we were going to have to adhere to the Administrative Procedures Act. So that's why, and I think, Michael, you can verify this. That's why we've gone to the process that we've gone to allow, we don't want our rulings to be, if somebody appeals it to a circuit court, to be thrown out, because if that's a precedence that every time we rule on something and it gets appealed, it's going to get thrown out, then for some technicality, because we were biased in the fact that we knew names and clinic names and client names and all that prior to a formal hearing, then that's going to give us really no power as a board.
You certainly,
So-
yes, and you certainly do. You're absolutely right. You certainly don't want to give the impression that a disciplinary matter is predetermined before it goes to hearing. I think this helps prevent it. You're definitely going to get all of the relevant facts to make a determination as to whether or not we need to move forward or we can dismiss a case. And in all events, under law, under the board rules, the board always has the final determination as to whether a disciplinary action is taken. Just as with they have the final say on whether or not a rule is going to be initiated or something like that. So that remains completely unchanged, and this process is merely to bolster the defensibility of those decisions.
And I'll just make one really brief comment, and I probably should have prefaced introducing the report with this, but the only difference between this report and the reports from the last few years, we had already made that change of having a complaint committee, redacting all information. So we've been redacting information for several years now. The only difference in this report is that instead of using a board member to review complaints and see all information and do the summary, is that we're now contracting out the review to outside parties who are veterinarians, so that we do not have a board member that has been so involved in the complaint process that they do have to recuse in the event of a formal hearing. So that is truly really the only, this report's not that different from the reports of the past few years, except for we have outside reviewers now versus a board member,
who will also likely, in almost all instances, be our expert witnesses at disciplinary hearings. So it really streamlines the process while keeping all of the ultimate authority resting with the board.
Well, I guess my real concern is that the perception of the public that this is a lot more efficient than what we've been doing. And maybe it's time that it occurs this way. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to it, but I think the perception from the public is they make a complaint and that it's heard ultimately directly by the board. And this just puts a layer in there. A lot of the complaints we've gotten have been personality driven, or lack of communication even in the past. And I guess it's the perception of the public. Are they being treated fairly? And is it our job as board members to ensure that process to the point that nothing's slipping through the cracks, so to speak?
No, I think your concerns are valid. I think we share those concerns. The big goal that we're trying to achieve here is not only efficiency, but is also having a neutral third party give a professional opinion on the case, with the ultimate aim being is that it will give validity to the process, that there will be one person reviewing it initially and making a recommendation, who will then later can be examined by the board, and then the board retaining the ultimate authority without having prejudged the case. Now, if that has unintended consequences, if folks come back and say, I don't like that process for X, Y, and Z reason, that's something Karen and I take seriously. I think we have vetted this process enough to where we don't think that will happen, because you will still be reviewing this, a third party will still be reviewing this, and both sides of that argument, I think, will get what they need, which is transparency in the process, and a hard look at the facts by the complainants, and then the veterinarians who are licensed and vet techs and veterinary technologists not feeling like that their case has been prejudged. So balancing those two equally important concerns out in the public, I think we've accomplished that with this process. But if it turns out we have not, Karen and I are the first ones to admit, we'll be the first ones to admit it and say, okay, well, we need to rethink this process. But I think we've gotten it right. I've been proven wrong on things like that, but I think we've gotten it.
Well, I'll agree. I think the process now is better than what it was the last couple of years, because the last couple of years I served on the complaint committee 1 year. So we would summarize it, and we didn't really present the redacted records or the redacted. And this, at least, it's not a recommendation per se. It's actually, you can actually look at the reviewer and what they, how they analyze the case. And, like in this first one, he actually gives references as to where he went, as to what the standard of care is in this case. So the process now, to me, is we've improved on what we've done in the last few years, because not only do you have a recommendation, but you also can go back and look at the reviewers, what the reviewer was looking at. And it's the same thing. It's all based on medical records. So as long as the reviewer is looking at the same thing we're looking at, it's the facts of the case, and that's the medical record. So I think ultimately, it all goes back to the medical record, which we as a board have said all along. If you've got good medical records and you can defend yourself, that's great. But if you don't, then the reviewer is going to be just like we are. They're going to be unable to, and maybe in that case, he says there's not adequate medical records. And then in that case, maybe we do need to go to a hearing. But
can I make
yes.
Okay, this is what I see, and I think this is where the confusion is. When the last were you and I, when we did these, we gave a summary of the case, like what exactly had happened. And by looking at this, we have no idea what happened until you go and you read the expert's recommendation. I think that's where the confusion is that there's no explanation in here what actually happened. Does that make sense to y'all? Because we used to summarize it, that on so-and-so presented to the thing for this certain procedure. And with this, you have no idea of knowing. That's what I think is missing, is the little bit of the explanation as to what it was all about.
Sure. Yeah. And our thinking was, whenever we put this together, was that instead of regurgitating the analysis or the summary by the expert reviewer, that we provided as an exhibit so you could see it word for word exactly what they put in their report. If you would prefer to have their analysis included in the summary, I think that would be fine with us. I mean, we wouldn't have any problem with that. Our initial thinking, though, was that you probably just wanted to see exactly what the reviewer wrote down and who the reviewer was.
I would like to know what this was before, like when I read the recommendation, that this was a case where that someone had presented a dog for some eye surgery. I would like to have known that before having to go down, because there's nothing in here that tells me anything under this, what it's about.
So Dr. Wood, so was it that, so was it not clear, I guess, the way we presented it, that you could go to the exhibit and read the expert summary? Like, would it just be helpful instead of just having like exhibit 1 out there, just put like 1 or 2 sentences about like just
Yes.
the basic?
Yes. I
Okay,
think
okay. That makes sense. I understand that. We could probably add something in there. I just don't want to, though, if we're going to provide a copy of the expert's report, I certainly don't want to put a full synopsis if the copy is going to be in there. So I think if 1 or 2 sentences would help, I think that
I
would
think
be,
just to know what it is, because I have no idea of what the complaint is, what the complaint, I mean, I know that it's gross negligence, but what are we doing gross negligence on? And I think that this may be something that Dr. Bird is also stating, because the process is exactly the same as it was before when the last time I did it. It's just that I don't know what is
Right.
going on.
So so instead of, Dr. Underwood, like when you reviewed the complaints and you would provide me like kind of a bullet point summary, and I would put that bullet point summary on the report. And so that was your summary. I just put it in bullet points on the report. So that is not here in this instance. Instead, we've just attached a copy of the summary for you all to read. So that is definitely a big difference for sure. But yeah, we can probably add just a brief summary on just like the basis of the complaint. And then again, that report, though, the exhibits will still be provided, so you can actually, because that'll take you through kind of the thing. But yes, I understand.
So you know exactly what it is before I have to,
Okay, sure.
It's okay. Is there any other discussion on that? Obviously, we're going to have to deal with the report the way it is today, unless we vote not to take the recommendations of the committee. So on dockets 22, let's see, 22-1, 20.
It would be 21-11, 21-12,
21-13,
13 and 14.
Okay, so these are all involved in the same case too. The last 2 are veterinary assistants, which obviously we don't have jurisdiction over because they're not licensed under us. The other 2 are veterinarians, the first of which was the owner and did not see the animal. And the complaint, docket 21-12, was the actual veterinarian that was responsible for seeing and treating the animal. So is there any other discussion on the case and the recommendation? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the complaint committee.
I make a motion to accept the recommendation of the complaint committee.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second it. Yeah.
And I just have one more comment before we vote. When in the past, when we've reviewed things, the board has had sufficient information on each case to be able to make that decision directly. With this process, it's like we're putting a layer in there. And from the public's perspective, I guess the issue I think that needs to be addressed is, do these people have a right of appeal to the board in some way when they feel the reviewer has not treated them fairly?
Well, their appeal would be to circuit court, wouldn't it, Michael? Because
in the complaint process, a complainant does have a right of appeal to the board, and in a vast majority of instances would not have any real standing to to contest the final determination of the board when it comes to the complaint. If a complainant was to say, well, they didn't look at all the facts, I mean, all I would say is that, I would turn you to Exhibit 1 of the complaint report, and it shows you the facts. And if you are unsatisfied, or if they somehow, for some reason, brought up this new process as a reason for why they were not given a fair shake with their complaint, I would encourage them to say, well, we implemented this new process on the November 15th, 2022 meeting. I would encourage you to go and look at our previous meetings where we reviewed other complaint reports and the difference, and see what you think the difference is, and we can talk about it. But I would just refer them back to Exhibit 1 because, on this case, or whichever relevant exhibit, because it gives. I mean, we literally gave them our old summaries as a template or a basis for what we're looking for. And so these did not, the way they formed these opinions and these analyses, it came from based on the work that this board has done in the past. So I think if that issue comes up, we are happy to address it. If it comes up on more than one occasion, we start identifying a pattern, we'll be the first ones to admit it, that probably something needs to change. But in terms of giving the same quality of analysis that we have in the past, the only difference is that we have contracted with specialists and with people who are specifically trained in these particular complaints, and have left the final determination with the board, which is always going to happen. So.
And if it would be helpful, I think another thing may be different. I can read the expert's report. I mean, I can read the exhibits, similar to what I would have done in the past of reading the bulleted summary. It's really the same thing. It's just in a different format. And so if that would be helpful, we can do that.
Like, I guess it's 99% perception, is that we've gone from potentially 5 members of the board, or 4 since one sat on the committee and had to recuse himself anyway, down to 1 specialist veterinarian making a determination for the board. And I don't know, but it's a perception that instead of having a full board review, we're down to a veterinarian we've contracted with. And I just want to be careful that we don't shift our protection of the public to perceived protection of the veterinary associate, profession, by letting one person who has somewhat of an economic interest to review more cases in the future, making determinations that the rest of the board, if they reviewed the whole thing, may or may not agree with. I mean,
so a couple things on that. Number one, the board is always the final say always rests with the board. If they disagree with the determination, either of an expert reviewer or staff, they're free to do so. Particularly when it comes to determining whether or not disciplinary action is going to be performed. In terms of the economic incentives and kind of the what's the ad hominem concerns about our reviewer and the objectivity of our reviewer and the economic incentives of our reviewer, we're having to fall just short of placing money in these people's hands to actually accept payment. And we're doing that for our protection because we want it to be a binding agreement and then to accept their actual payment. Most of these folks want to do it for free. Like straight up, they want to do it for free. They see it as part of their continuing obligation to the profession and to the public. And we have to say, no, you need to take this small amount of money. And they're like, okay, well, whatever, we'll just, put $250 on it or whatever. And it's a very small amount they're getting paid for the amount of work that they're doing and the amount of work they will be doing if it goes to hearing. So I thought it was important to put that up. In terms of the struggle, or not the struggle, the work of making sure that the perception of the board's work is being done appropriately and the perception of the public. All I can really say about this current system right now, other than we have taken painstaking thought and many hours of discussion as to what could go right and what could go wrong in this process, is that this process is in line with what I would say is probably 99% of all regulatory work in Arkansas state government. And if someone has an issue with that, I would ask them not only to listen to all of the thought and all of the things that we considered when implementing this process, but also that we have to conform to the laws and the rules and procedures that are in place for regulatory bodies. And this is the way to best conform to that while protecting the interest of both complainant and respondent. So.
Okay. Well, is there any other discussion? There's been a motion and a second to accept the complaint committee's recommendation on the first four dockets that were mentioned. Any other discussion? If there's not, then we'll vote. All in favor of the recommendation signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right. So complaint committee's recommendation is accepted on the first four dockets. So now we'll move to, I guess the next one's docket 2201. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And so the allegation in this case was incompetence, gross negligence, or other malpractice in the practice of veterinary medicine. We did send this out for review. It was determined that there was insufficient evidence to prove the allegations against the respondent. Board staff also conducted a separate review and reviewed all information, and we agreed with the reviewer's recommendation. We also did not uncover any other violations that were not specifically alleged in the complaint. Of course, you've had a chance to hopefully read Exhibit 2, which is the report from the expert. And of course, if you have any questions on it, we can discuss that. But the recommendation from board staff would be to dismiss the complaint.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept the recommendation of the committee.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All right. It's been moved and seconded to accept the complaint committee's recommendation. Any further discussion? Not, we'll all signify by saying aye for approval.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So our complaint committee recommendation accepted on that case. So
Okay.
now we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, so this is docket number 2022-03. You can find the expert report in Exhibit 3. Again, the allegation in this case was incompetence, gross negligence, or other malpractice in the practice of veterinary medicine.
Make a motion that we accept the complaint committee's recommendation.
Okay. Is
Second.
there- Second. All right. Any discussion on 2203? There's no discussion. We'll vote. All in favor of approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So motion passes to accept the recommendations on 2206. So no, that's not
Just
22.
2203.
speed this
2203.
process, I make a recommendation that we approve the complaint committee on 06, 08, and 15.
Okay, let's look at, so everybody had a chance to look at those, 06, 08.
And I'll just make one little note on 15. We did have an extra part in the recommendation based on the reviewer's analysis, that the board would like to send a letter to the respondent regarding deficiencies in his physical examination findings in the medical record.
Okay,
But other than that, it would just be a letter of advisement, not an actual discipline.
okay. So approval, a motion for approval on 6, 8, and 15, correct? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the recommendations on those three cases, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so the recommendations are accepted on those three cases. So is that all of the complaints?
That is,
Okay.
we have a lot of complaints that are pending review. We have several that are out for review, and others that I will be sending out. So, but this report today did definitely help us get through some that we've had for a while.
Okay, yeah, because we kind of had a backlog, I think, didn't we, for a while?
Yes, if you'll notice, we were finishing up some of the last ones received in 2021. So I think we are now on a pretty good track.
Okay. So has there been a dramatic increase in complaints or about the same?
We had 15 total complaints last year, and so far this year I have had 22.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's increased, but
Okay.
no, last year though, to just have 15 complaints was pretty low. So I think we're more on track with what a normal year would be.
Okay. Okay, well then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and that's the corporate practices, approval of corporate practice.
Could we have a 5-minute bathroom break?
Please,
Yes.
thank you.
Sure.
All right, we'll adjourn and be back at, let's say 10:30. How about that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Kara, while we're waiting,
Yes.
when we get to the applications, there was I didn't write it down, but there was one gal that had said she surrendered her license, and what it appeared that she just let it lapse.
Right. Other states have different verbiage that they use for that. So sometimes if people don't renew, they call it a surrender, which really isn't anything having to do with discipline. So, yeah.
Well, she marked it on her form that yes, she did surrender, and I just wanted to double check with you and make sure that that wasn't
No, it was
wasn't
not
a board action.
No.
She just let it lapse.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah.
And so I didn't see any reason to to get shook up about it.
No, no, I think it was just I think it's a terminology thing. So yeah, it wasn't any type of discipline. Let's see, it's 10:32. Dr. Underwood or Dr. Bonner, are y'all back yet? Give it just a few more minutes.
And while we're waiting, my comments were not a rebuke of what you've done, Kara. It was just recording the perception of what we're doing and how we're going about it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I figured there would be questions, so that's no problem.
Actually, I think it makes for a more efficient meeting.
Well, it definitely makes for a much more efficient process to actually get through reviewing complaints for sure. Not just in the meeting, but outside of the meeting as well. So, all right, Dr. Bonner, it's like you're back. Dr.
I'm
Underwood,
sorry,
Dr. Underwood, are you back yet? All right, Dr. Turchi, looks like everyone's back.
All right, well, we'll reconvene, and then so we're to corporate practices.
Yeah. So there was just one for today, and that would be Lap of Love at Veterinary Practice Holdings 2 PLLC.
Yeah. And so
And for I'll make the motion that we approve it.
Okay.
As I don't see any reason that it should be disapproved.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded to approve the corporate practice for Lap of Love veterinary practice. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Uh,
All right. Okay, that corporate practice is approved. That's the only corporate practice we have, correct?
That is correct.
and I
Yep.
do have a question before
Okay.
Okay.
my internet keeps off. Uh, if there was a hearing, a complaint and a hearing, and something found, we disciplined a veterinarian working at a corporate practice. Is there any provision for us to revoke a corporate practice if we find that in the process of that hearing that it's more widespread?
You know, Dr. Bird, I think that's a great question. And I know it's certainly been contemplated at some of our national meetings. And we're set up a little bit differently. Other states actually have a facilities permit, a veterinarian charge for the facility and that sort of thing. And so they are subject to some disciplinary action through that mechanism. But I believe the way the board's rule is written on corporate practices is they can be subject to discipline by the board, just like any other license would be. Michael, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm almost positive it carries the same weight as, you know, someone's individual license would. But typically, you know, when we do get a complaint, I mean, it's against the individual veterinarians. That's normally what we're looking at. But that's a great question. I think at some point along the line that we might, you know, as more and more things go corporate, I would not be surprised if we see that somewhere down the line of having to kind of deal with that type of issue.
Okay. All right, so I guess we'll move on then to applications for veterinarians by reciprocity. Most of these, are all these reciprocity?
Yeah, there's only one that I think technically is an endorsement. Let me go through the ones that are fully completed reciprocity applications. I can list those off for you.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of notes on a few.
Okay.
So the ones that are fully completed applications for reciprocal licensure, that would be Dr. Bailey Ziegler, Dr. Shelby Nestor, Dr. Stephen Schultz, Dr. Nicholas Kelsey, Dr. Roger Schumacher, Dr. Michael Stewart, Dr. Randy Cran, Dr. Anthony Nada, Dr. Elizabeth Leverins, Dr. J.C. Sweeney, Dr. Nancy Carpenter, Dr. Caroline Baer, and Dr. Jason Chin. I did not have his transcript when I sent these out, but I got his transcript yesterday and that completes his application. So those individuals have fully completed applications for reciprocal licensure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and make a motion to extend reciprocity, those listed in good standing.
Yes. All right. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Okay, just for clarification, at this end of the world, so that we're ready to prove all but 9, 10, 15, and 16. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the ones that I did not list out are going to be Dr. Genevieve Rimmers. She, I think, is actually an endorsement application. And then Dr. Douglas Neal and Dr. Caitlin Hornig, those aren't fully completed applications at this time. But everyone else on besides those three, those were the names I read out.
Okay, well, I thought you mentioned Dr. Nada as
Yes,
one
Yep.
of those.
yes.
Yeah, Dr. Nada was on the list.
And there was a disciplinary action listed in this file, but I didn't see what the disciplinary was.
Okay, let me get that pulled up real quick because I'm not.
There was one that gave up her license in Canada, 2 different licenses when she moved. That's the only one that I saw.
Yeah, I saw there was a disciplinary action on Dr. Nada, but I couldn't. I'm like Dr.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check that because I don't believe there was one, but let me just double check it. Okay, for Dr. Nada, I know he only had a Louisiana license. Let's see. Yeah, Louisiana did not give me any extra information. Normally there's something attached, and it's not listed on the AABSB score report. So, Dr. Bird, I can double check on that. Yeah, because they didn't send an attachment and it wasn't listed on the AABSB documentation, that did not flag for me. So I can inquire about that, Dr. Bird.
Yeah, I just think we ought to before we.
Okay, that's not a
Have
problem.
to know. Otherwise, I don't have an objection to him, but I did see that there had been a disciplinary action, but we didn't have anything to judge that by.
No, they didn't. They did not send any additional information with that. I can contact the director at the Louisiana board and see if that was correct information or if that was something that was, a mistake. Because I know he did not check discipline information on his application either. So
Right.
I'll double check on that. That's not a problem.
And it just has it that he's had a disciplinary action.
Right.
But it didn't say what it was or whether it was
Right.
something.
Yeah,
Minor.
normally, when I send a license verification to another state, Dr. Bird, if there's been disciplinary action, I automatically put a copy of the discipline with it when I send it. And so they did not do that. And so I'll just double check to make sure that's actually correct, especially since it's not on his AABSB history either. For his license, for his exam transfer information, it's supposed to be on that report as well. So yeah, we'll definitely double check on that, Dr. Bird. So you want to hold Anthony Nada from the list then?
Yeah, let's.
I would
hold him
till
off
we.
the- So let's
Till
include
we
in the motion, all those except Anthony Nada.
And because I didn't have all the names, I had stuck out. You said you received the missing report from Elizabeth Lavernez. She was missing New York.
Um,
That was number 10.
okay, well, let me double check that because I believe I had all of her information. So let me, unless it just didn't make it into the copy.
Well, if we had it, I misread it. There was one that looked like it was from some. I didn't
I
see
have
New York.
The New York verification is on there, Dr. Bird. It's a primary source verification from their website.
Okay, well, I saw the one that.
No, I've got
NYS Professions.
yeah, that's New York State.
Okay, but I didn't see where they made any reference to no disciplinary actions.
Okay, so that is, if you'll see at the very top, they do list it as a primary source license verification. And so that is the format that they use. If there was discipline, I'm sure it would be indicated on this since they do use this as a primary source.
Well, it's probably all right, but it just concerns me that it doesn't rule that out.
Well, I understand. I know we've had several, I mean, she doesn't have any discipline listed on her AAVSB report either. I know we've had instances where there is discipline and it's still not listed on that report, but I think especially since that license is no longer active in New York also, you know, I would, if they listed on their website as the primary source, I think that is acceptable for our purposes.
And then you said Dr. Horning, Caitlin Horning, number 15.
No,
that
I
you
pulled her out of that
Did
group.
get the,
We haven't done Dr. Hornick yet.
okay,
Dr.
'cause
Bird.
we hadn't had New Mexico on her.
Right, which is why, yeah, I didn't include her in the group that I listed. I was going to pull her out.
So the ones that aren't listed are Nada, Snell, Hornig, and was there one other one?
So we're gonna pull out Anthony Nada, Douglas Neal, Caitlin Hornig, and then Genevieve Rimmers. Will do her separately as well. So everybody else in the packet would be blanket approval for reciprocity.
Okay, so number 16, Dr. Chin, you said you
I received his transcript yesterday. His application is complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So we've got a motion to blanket
I'm good with
approve.
that.
We've got a motion to blanket approve those that were listed. We're not going to go through all of them again, but Kara's got the list. Was it seconded? Did you second it, Dr. Bird? Okay, well, I'll second it, and let's, so all in favor of approving blanket approval on those lists of applicants signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, so that group's approved.
Okay, so sounds like we're gonna table Dr. Anthony Nada to the next meeting so I can find out if he's really had disciplinary action in Louisiana. So Dr. Genevieve Rimmers, she would be an endorsement application. She's not had to have a license to do her job that she has currently. It's not required because she does some work for IDEX. She is board certified, and I do have a copy of that in there. And so that would meet the requirement for endorsement, is that she does have a board certification. And just in case anyone was wondering, University of Montreal is accredited by the ABMA. It is not a situation where we would need an ECFBG certificate. And so are there any other questions that on her application you might have?
Okay.
So I make a motion, we approve her.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve Dr. Rimmers for licensure by endorsement. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Dr. Rimmers is approved.
All right, so the last two we've got Dr. Douglas Neal, Dr. Caitlin Hornig. We would probably just need to approve those pending the missing items for Dr. Hornig. It is a license verification from New Mexico. She has checked on that this week. She thought that had been done, found out not. And so she has requested that. So I should be getting that any day now for her. And then Dr. Douglas Neal, he did have to go through an ECFBG program. He went to the University of Liverpool, which is not ABMA accredited. He's been in practice for many years here in the United States, in Kansas, I think. And so, but he is having a really tough time getting his transcript from the University of Liverpool. And also, he doesn't have his diploma anymore. So he's working on getting a copy of that as well. And so he's also asked the ABMA ECFBG folks to try to help him with getting that sent to me also. So I know he's working on it, but it's just been a really slow process to get those two items.
I'll make a motion that we approve both these pending the receipt of their rest of their application.
Second.
Okay. Motion is made and seconded to approve Dr. Snell and Dr. Horning pending their completion of their application. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, then that passes. So that's all of the veterinary applications, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now we'll move on to other business. Do we have any other business?
I don't think I have any other business, but you all might, so.
Yeah. None that I know of. The only thing I might inform everybody of, and Kara informed, there is some legislation. Has that been filed yet from the veterinary technologist?
So the veterinary technician specialist piece of legislation has been filed as an interim study. That is not a piece of filed legislation. That doesn't, those things are not going to happen until the legislative session starts next year. And Michael, I don't know, you may have some more explanation on the interim studies, but sometimes things will be filed as an interim study so that they really, can be studied over the next few years. But I've also had experiences in which the interim study was filed, and then that very next legislative session, there was a bill filed and it became legislation. So I've had experience with kind of both things happening. I don't know, Michael, if you have any comments on what interim studies are.
So long story short, an interim study proposal is a formal request by a legislator for the General Assembly to study either within an existing committee or within an interim committee to study an issue of concern to that particular legislator. So there is a whole set of rules for that, and what they can and they can't do, and all that stuff, just like everything else. One thing is that, like Kara said, that's not a bill that gets considered to be passed into law. An interim study proposal can result in a bill that becomes a law. So, and once that happens, it'll go through the regular legislative process and in the schoolhouse rock process. And so, once if that was to happen, we'd certainly let the board know. Like Kara said, in a session, you never know what's going to happen. So we will be watching the legal department, and all of the division directors and the board directors have been tasked with reviewing legislation daily that affects their particular areas. And so you will have multiple eyes on it. So if something does get filed as a bill that is either that or anything else that affects the board, we'll be letting everybody know. And we won't be waiting to like a meeting or anything like that. We'll just let you know.
Yeah, I'd encourage everybody just to go on and read that proposed interim study. I don't know. I guess after the interim study, will they report their findings? Is there a formal report on their interim study, or?
I don't know. I can, what I'll do is I can email you out a link to it just so y'all have it, so y'all can go out there and read it. I'll make sure you got the link for it.
Yeah. Yeah. The only real implication for us is going to be if they require us to make rules on whatever, because a lot of times what they do is they pass a law and then the board has to come up with a rulemaking to kind of finalize what that's going to look like. So that would be the only real thing that we're going to be involved with, I guess, would be the rulemaking on if that passes. So,
yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to make everybody aware that that's been thrown out there. And so that's probably the next thing that we'll have to consider if something like that passes. So, all right. If nothing else, then I guess we will, we need to discuss scheduling our next meeting. Does anybody?
What sounds good? Historically, we've had like our first meeting of the year in February.
Well, I've got vacation in February, but I don't know when.
Okay.
So I'll have to ask my wife. We're supposed to go, we're going skiing in February, but I don't know the week. I'll have to figure that out.
Okay.
So we can schedule something and then I can find out. And if we need to, I can get back with you.
Yeah, I think last year, if I'm remembering correctly, we had a meeting like the first or the last, somewhere in that last week of February, if I'm remembering correctly last year. So if we want to do a Tuesday morning again, that would probably be either February 21st, or the 28th would be the next Tuesday. So
I think we are going in early February, but I'm gonna try to find out.
does anyone else know if
Anybody have?
like the 21st or 28th, would anyone have a preference on that, or?
They're fine with me.
At the moment, I'm okay with either one of those.
Yeah. And
I know it's
should be
really far ahead, but
I
Subject
should
to
be
check.
okay with either one of those too, because I think we're going in early February, but
Dr. Underwood, would you have a preference, the 21st or the 28th of February? Hey, Dr. Underwood, you're on mute. I don't think we heard you.
I don't think either one of those dates. We're going bird hunting, but I don't think it's then. I think it's the first of the month.
Okay. Well, then I'll leave it up to y'all, 21st or 28th.
I'll make a motion, we do it on the 21st.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Second. All right. Then
Is
it's
this
going to be
potentially
the.
Zoom or do we need to meet person?
I'll leave that up to y'all too.
Like the Zoom.
Yeah, that time of year, the weather may be an issue. We
Yes.
don't know.
That's true. That is definitely true. I think last year we did have, I think our February meeting last year, I was at home because of snow, because I'm pretty sure I did the Zoom meeting from my house. So I think it was, yeah, that is that time of year.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we had snow here, but it wasn't on the road, so I could have gotten anywhere, but it's kind
Okay.
of a mess. So
So we'll
Let's
plan
get some-
on February 21st, 9 a.m. Zoom.
Yes, ma'am.
all right. I guess if that's it, then we'll move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Happy
All right.
Thanksgiving,
All
guys.
right. Yeah, y'all have a great
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving
everybody.
next week. Thank y'all so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.